that Islam is a way of life. Islam is different than culture. It's a religion. And Islam actually means peace. I would like people to know that Islam is a way of life. Islam is different than culture. It's a religion. And Islam actually means peace. A lot of people put religion and culture together, and I'm also guilty of it. My family's also guilty of it, because we are culturally one way, but we are religious in another way. So I want people to know it's two different things. If I choose to do something that's a part of my culture, like where I'm from, doesn't mean the religion. Islam is practiced all over the world. There's Caucasian Muslims, there's Asian Muslims, there's Black Muslims, there's white Muslims, there's Hispanic Muslims actually are on the rise. So I just want people to know that we're human beings first. And specifically for being a Muslim, Black, Somali, Canadian, I want people to know that we are human being first. We are mothers. We are your sisters. We are your neighbors. We are your health practitioners. We are your educators. We are your, sister that's sitting beside you, sipping the tea, and we want to come home to our families. A lot of things that have been happening, especially over the past couple of years in Edmonton and across Canada, actually, it's very disheartening. When those word terrorist first came out, I remember looking at it and hearing that, and looking back now, I can't believe that a whole society of people were just targeting in on one, ethnicity, because they weren't even looking at them as Muslims. They were saying, oh, these Arab terrorists, or these, just that labeling. I can't believe it.
My life's work as a scholar of Islam is to help people understand that Islam is a diverse thing, that all religions, all faiths are by their very nature diverse, because religions only exist through the people who practice them. One of the profs that I used to TA for used to say, Islam is not a thing that you can call up on the phone and ask its opinion about things, right? There's no box out there called Islam or called Muslim that you can identify and say, this is what it is. Islam has built diversity into its tradition from the very beginning. And that there was room for that. That not only was there room for that, but it was encouraged. There's a verse of the Quran that says that Allah has made us into nations and tribes so that we might know one another. And it's one of my favorite verses, because I really like this idea of, what does it mean to know someone? Do I know someone because I know what their living room looks like, or I know their name, or I know who their parents were? And my argument has always been, we know people when we are empathetic towards them. I know you if I know what makes you laugh and what makes you cry, and what is going to get you out of bed in the morning. Ultimately, that's what it means to know someone. And I think of all of the things that I want people to know about Islam, it's that at the heart of Islam, there is this call to knowing one another in these deep and true ways, and to building community that comes out of that. The rest of that verse says, so we should vie with one another in goodness, right? That if we are going to come together in our differences, and even if there is that little bit of streak of competition that sometimes happens, that competitiveness should be towards goodness. That we don't pretend that as humans, we don't sometimes kind of jostle for space, but that we should be doing that in ways that create a better world. And so, yeah, I think diversity, and I think that call towards bettering ourselves and bettering the world that we live in, that is the Islam that I know and the Islam that I grew up with. And honestly, the Islam that most of people in my life practice. Most of the Muslims that I know are deeply invested in community, in justice, in creating a world that is more caring and more compassionate.
I use my career to allow non-Muslims to learn more about Islam. Through my job as a personal trainer, I work with a lot of non-Muslims, and I use that as an opportunity to teach people about Islam, not through my words, just through my actions.
as a Muslim woman, who's visibly Muslim, um, you know, you tend to get questions where people make assumptions about you, and the assumptions are based, it's not really their fault or that they mean this, it's ill meaning, but because of what's on the media, people have this assumption that, like, uh, a Muslim woman, because she wears the hijab, she's oppressed, or she doesn't belong here, or she's not from here. But a lot of Muslim sisters, like, we're just like everyone else, right? Like, we may just dress differently, but we have the same aspirations as everyone else. And, our priorities are really the same. It's usually about family, about, friends and family, and keeping each other safe, Um, I remember that one time when it was very cold and I was getting into an elevator uh, with another person who's not a Muslim, and then she was very friendly. She smiled at me, and I smiled at her, and then she looked at me and she said, "Oh, it's very cold outside. You must not be used to it where you're from." And that's something I want to bring up, because I think it's important that this othering, she didn't hear my accent. Obviously, if someone would to hear my accent, they would know that I wasn't born here or I'm not from here. But I just smiled at her. I haven't said a word, but just assumption based on my look that I don't belong here. So I want that people to just kind of step back and say, why do you make that assumption? Like, why can't someone who look like me be Muslim? I mean, be a Canadian. Why can't someone who look like me be a Canadian? That you have to assume that I'm not from here, because I know many Muslim women with hijab who were born here, who were second, third generation here. Imagine if they were told that way, right? How they would feel. So I hope that people realize that we shouldn't make assumptions, and that the more you get to know people, the more you will realize that we are more alike than different. And I remember my youngest, when he was about 6 years old, one time, how kids sometimes just come to you and it's like, "Mama, mm, why do you say you're from Singapore? You look just like me, so you're Canadian." You know, a 6-year-old saying, "You look like me, so you're Canadian," because he thinks like, "Hey, I'm brown, but I'm Canadian, so why does my mom keep saying that she's from Singapore?" And so for me, that gives me hope. In the future, maybe people will see a woman like me and don't make an assumption that I'm not Canadian or Canadian enough. Uh, so so the next time you see a Muslim woman, just just give her a smile, and don't treat us like we're different. We're the same. Under this headscarf, we're the same.
What I would like people to know about Islam is that to be a Muslim, to truly surrender to God and His love and His mercy, it's something that you hold in your heart. When I was at university, I started my spiritual journey after a devastating breakup. So I thought my future was going one way, and it kind of got ripped out from underneath me. And so I had an opportunity to really create this space of self-discovery, learning about what I really believed in. Because I was looking for love. I was looking for unconditional love that I had learned from my mom growing up. And so I was missing that. There was something missing, because that idea of what I thought was meant to happen got taken away from me. And so there was something missing there. One night I did have a dream, and I won't go into detail, but in the dream, I was protecting myself from this entity that was holding me. And I tried to play the prayer in my sleep, and then she put her arms around my throat and my lungs and just tried to strangle me in my sleep. And I thought I woke my whole house awake.
And that was the moment for me, a milestone where I thought, what is this prayer? Like, what does it even say? And why are these entities so afraid of it? And that's what I needed. That was the one thing that was missing, is like, where is the explanation for the unseen? Where's the protection coming from? And how do I use that in order to protect myself on my own journey? And so I headed into Ramadan of 2018. I had actually, every time we pray, we say our declaration of faith, we say the Shahada. And so that's kind of like the statement that there is no God but one God. And the Prophet ﷺ is the last and final messenger. So we acknowledge all the prophets and accept all of them. And then we also just say that we only worship one God. So you say it during prayer every day, like 10 to 20, 30 times a day. So I had already felt like in my heart I was Muslim, but then practicing Ramadan and having that space to also learn more was really important. And my journey with family and friends definitely changed. So I really want to acknowledge the people that supported me in my journey. Coincidentally, one of the people, their name means call to prayer, which I think is really, really beautiful. So they really helped me with the questions I had. And if they didn't know, they would ask someone that they knew. And I got my first prayer mat from them and my first Eid outfit. So little things like that. And then I also had the Yusuf family, who is a Sudanese Muslim family that took me in when I had gotten displaced from my family on multiple occasions. And so it was really beautiful to have a space where I felt like I was at home.
Take your time, take your time.
Time, 5 kids. She had twins and she was pregnant with her 6th. She now has 7. So the home is filled with a lot of love, and I was still welcome there. And so it was really beautiful because God gave me this opportunity to not only learn about my faith from a family that is born Muslim, who spoke Arabic, who just had this beautiful culture of like being together and really like all the kids. Like I've never been around that many kids in my life. And I loved it. It was so much like, it was an overwhelming amount of love, even with the situation that I was experiencing.
Today, I don't practice Islam because of what how it has affected me as a young girl growing up in a very strict household. Religion of Islam shows the beauty of prayer, doing 5 times salat, which is prayer 5 times a day. A practicing Muslim has to do fasting. You have to go at least once in your life to Mecca to do the pilgrimage. So many beautiful things about Islam, but again, it's not for everyone, and it is a very clean and pure religion, and very respectful. Most of the women wear their hijab. You don't have to. It's what's in your heart. But at the same time, you have to do what's right for yourself.
Yeah, I think there's a law. It's really difficult because, we're dealing with years of media that's portrayed us in a very negative light. And it's very hard to counteract that. But I honestly wish people would know that we're just very similar to everyone else. We're just regular people who are trying to make it, who, care about our families. And as much as we may look different or, speak different languages, I feel like our struggle is very much the same, especially when it comes to, being a hijabi wearing Muslim woman. I think a lot of people don't understand that. And sometimes that misunderstanding or that not understanding equates to fear. And what I wish people would know is, being a Muslim woman and choosing to wear the hijab, for me, that's what empowers me, and that's my choice. And when we're looking at, what empowers women, I think it's almost paternalistic to assume that one key, so to speak, is going to empower every woman the same, because we're all different. We're not a monolith.
And, you know, maybe women feel empowered by not wearing any clothes, and maybe feel empowered by wearing clothes like myself. And I think what I want people to understand is we just want the freedom to be able to do whatever empowers us, whatever that looks like, without, you know, being harassed or without being forced. Whether, you know, a great example of that we're seeing is, for example, France and Quebec who are banning the hijab, where in Iran they're forcing women to wear the hijab. And it's just this idea that women should just be able to choose whatever works for them. And that's really what I want people to know, that, you know, if it is a choice, even if you don't understand it, that you just allow me.
My mother taught me to say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There's no mighty or power except for, you know, the power of Allah, al-Ilah, the only one creator that created the universe and mankind, and there's no superiority or inferiority. And Islam came to eradicate that. Unfortunately, now, some, you know, within the Muslim world, people are weaponizing Islam to be harmful and to harm others. Well, you know, my thing to that is it's given. I feel like throughout human history, we see how science was weaponized to harm Black people in terms of, you know, issues of, you know, experimentation, sterilization within the indigenous people, you know, creating scientific racism in terms of who's inferior, who's superior. Also, people weaponize culture, right? And language. But when you really look at, like, people weaponize faith, it's not just Islamic faith. They will weaponize various of different faiths, whether you belong to Buddhism, whether you belong to Christianity, whatever you belong to. Sometimes people, any human being that, you know, does not have a pure intention will use as a means anything that can exploit the human emotion. And that's why from a young age, critical thinking, something that was so important for me. And I feel like there is no empowerment that is greater than the fact that I'm a Muslim woman, because from the beginning I'm taught, you know, if you get married, keep your last name, keep your lineage, keep your inheritance. You can divorce when you want to divorce. Your land that you receive through inheritance belongs to you. You can dispose it however you feel. For the longest time, we've been taught that you have to pick Islam or you have to pick your culture. And I think that's the greatest disservice, because within, you know, the Muslim world, there's Islamophobia, like there is, Afrophobia, anti-Black racism. And within the African community, there's Islamophobia. And within the Muslim African community, there's patriarchy. So sometimes you feel like you don't know where to belong, and you feel like you have to leave one identity behind to fit into every aspect of your life. But for me, I finally realized I am so connected to who I am. It took me a while to find it. I'm 32 years old. It took me a while to say, I think this is who I am. And it starts off by saying, I'm a Muslim woman, and I'm a woman of African descent.
Because I love this country and I want to uphold the rights and freedoms that make Canada what it is, fighting against discrimination, fighting against Islamophobia is not only what it means to be Canadian, but will also help my Muslim brothers and sisters as well.